The British royal family, that's an institution that's existed in one form or another for more than 1,000 years. Born into a life of luxury and privilege, they experience an entirely different world than the rest of us. So for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 15 creepy facts about the royal family. Number 15. Prince Harry's forgotten past. For a long time, Prince Harry was seen as the party prince. As the younger sibling, he was never destined to take the crown unless something terrible happened, and in many ways he had a free pass to become whoever he wanted. More recently, since his marriage, he's shunned his own family and moved to California to pursue commercial and charitable opportunities, but he's not always been the respectful and caring man that he's now trying to become. Admittedly, it must be tough growing up in the public eye, but Harry's found himself on the wrong side of news reports for things that the vast majority of us wouldn't even dream of doing. This is no more clear than what happened in 2005, when the front pages of the British newspapers were covered with images of him attending a party. This wouldn't normally be anything unusual or newsworthy, and his brother, the future king, was even there dressed as a lion. But for some reason, Harry decided that his costume at this fancy dress party would be a Nazi desert uniform, complete with swastika armband. To make matters worse, this happened just a few days before the annual Holocaust Memorial Day, and at first, he didn't seem to think anything was wrong. Eventually, he apologized for any offense caused and agreed that it was a bad choice of costume. But that's surely something every decent person in the world would realize without needing to be caught on camera by the paparazzi first. Number 14. Prince Charles and cash bribes. Citizens of the United States realized hundreds of years ago that they didn't want their politics interfered with by the British monarchy, and in the UK the attitude is the same. While the monarch retains a constitutional role, they are meant to stay neutral in matters and not influence political events. They do, however, have an extremely privileged position in public life and have access to all of the most powerful people in the country, with regular meetings with the Prime Minister and the government, as well as military commanders. They also have plenty of money for both their own interests and from subsidies given by British taxpayers. So it's proven controversial that Prince Charles, the future king, has been caught accepting large amounts of cash on several occasions in previous years. One incident saw him receiving hundreds of thousands of pounds, which was supposedly in exchange for the donor being granted British residency. And in June of 2022, it was revealed that he accepted 3 cash donations of €1 million each from a former Prime Minister of Qatar between 2011 and 2015. No one is suggesting that any of these payments were illegal, and it appears as if the money was given directly to the prince's charities. But you have to wonder why someone would give money to him in this way, and how many others have also done it that haven't yet been made public. Number 13. Edward VIII's questionable friendships. Edward VIII was the King of the UK and the Commonwealth from January of 1936 until the end of that year, when he abdicated in order to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee, which isn't allowed while he was the head of the Church of England. This is one of the most scandalous events in the past century of the monarchy, but isn't the creepiest thing that Edward was involved in. He's often remembered as the romantic king who gave up everything for what his heart desired. But the truth is there was another reason why the establishment was so keen for him to abdicate the throne, and it had nothing to do with whether he was marrying a divorcee or not. Instead, Edward was an open sympathizer with the Nazis and was good friends with Adolf Hitler. There was a concentrated effort by the Nazi leader to court Edward, and documents were later found that the plan was to invade Britain and keep him as a puppet king, with further evidence also showing that he suggested Germany should bomb England into oblivion. It became clear that not only did the establishment try to cover up this unacceptable relationship, but took matters into their own hands to ensure Hitler was never able to exploit it. Number 12. Prince John and a life of exile. Prince John was born in 1905 and was the youngest of King George V and Queen Mary's 6 children. In 1910, his father became king and Prince John became 5th in line to the throne, but the family had concerns about this. A year earlier, he had been diagnosed with severe epilepsy, and over the next few years, his condition deteriorated. As the royal family's priority is to maintain their public image, even at the cost of the health of one of their own, Prince John was sent to live at Sandringham House in 1916, and that was the last the public would see of him. Very little is known of what life was like for him there, or the types of treatment he underwent, but he died at the age of 13 in January of 1919. It was only after his death that his illness was made public, along with the news that he had died from an extreme seizure. But even when everyone was giving the family the benefit of the doubt, another piece of evidence came forward many years later. A letter that had been written by Prince Edward, who was 11 years older than his brother, said that he saw Prince John's death as little more than a regrettable nuisance, and that he had become more of an animal than anything else. Number 11. Diana threw herself down the stairs. The marriage difficulties between Prince Charles and Prince Diana have been well documented, and it led to her feeling like an outsider within the family and trapped within a loveless marriage. Towards the public, they put on a good appearance until the marriage broke down for good. But behind closed doors, things were very different. During a series of interviews for a biography, she said that while pregnant with William, she became bulimic and had extreme morning sickness. This meant that she had to cancel a planned visit to the Duchy of Cornwall's estate. Charles apparently made her feel guilty for that, and in a desperate attempt to get support from him, she threw herself down the stairs. She said that the Queen came running out and was horrified by what had happened, clearly distressed for Diana and her unborn child. But Charles's reaction was the complete opposite. He instead went out riding as he had planned and came back later as if nothing had happened. Even when it was time to give birth, she said she had to schedule a time around Charles's polo games, painting a picture of a cold, emotionally detached man who cares only about himself. Number 10. Their name wasn't always Windsor. The surname of the royal family today is Windsor, but rather than being a historic name that's passed down through the generations, it's one that was simply chosen by the family in 1917 to project a more wholesome public image. At the time, the world was caught up in the First World War, where the German Empire, along with its allies, was trying to significantly expand its borders. When King Edward VII, the son of Queen Victoria, had ascended to the British throne in 1901, he had the name of an influential European royal house called the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. This, of course, had German connotations, and this was something that officials didn't believe the British public or the rest of the world would accept after what was happening during the war. To distance themselves from their German heritage, the family decided to take the name Windsor, which has a long association with British royalty through the town of Windsor and the royal residence that's located there. At the time, this was seen as a controversial move, but because national pride was high, it was overlooked. As the years went on, people forgot about it, and the plan to distance themselves from Germany succeeded. Number 9. The missing heir to the throne. There are plenty of examples throughout history of the lengths that people will go in order to get their hands on power. But one of the darkest stories of all took place in the 1480s and changed the course of English and British history. In April of 1483, Edward IV died, and it said before this happened that he wanted his brother Richard, the Duke of Gloucester, to become the Lord Protector of his 12-year-old son, Edward, before he was crowned as Edward V. What followed, though, was one of the biggest mysteries in English history, as Edward and his younger brother were sent by Richard to the Tower of London. Back then, it wasn't the prison that it would ultimately become known as, but a royal palace, and at the same time their uncles were sent elsewhere and beheaded. Despite plans to crown Edward, things always happened to be delayed, and eventually Richard was able to pass a law that found Edward to be the illegitimate son of the previous king, and that he instead was the rightful heir. Richard became Richard III, and the two boys in the tower vanished. Rumors spread as to their ultimate fate until 1674, when workmen found a box containing the remains of two children under a staircase. It's still not certain that these bones that are now displayed in Westminster Abbey really were of the boys, but it sure looks that way, and means that Richard ordered the murder of them to ensure he would stay on the throne. Number 8. The human alarm clock. Most of us need alarm clocks to make sure we wake up on time, and in the modern age, it's usually a timer on our phones that we rely on. But when you live a life of privilege, though, you don't need to live like the rest of us, and the Queen instead has her very own human alarm clock. The position, which was first established in 1843 by Queen Victoria, is officially called the Piper to the Sovereign, and sees a non-commissioned officer from a Scottish or Irish regiment who plays the bagpipes for 15 minutes at 9 a.m. each morning. Depending on your views of bagpipe music and of using people in this way, you might think that this is an incredible luxury afforded to the Queen, or the thing of nightmares. Being woken up by bagpipe music at the same time every morning certainly isn't everyone's cup of tea and is surely a questionable way to start the day. Number 7. George, Duke of Kent. Prince George, the Duke of Kent, was the fourth son of King George V and Queen Mary. As he was further down the line of succession, he was never expected to be king, so instead he joined the Royal Navy in the 1920s and went on to work for the government afterwards. After becoming the Duke of Kent in 1934, he joined the Royal Air Force as an officer and lived a life that the family did its best to keep out of the public eye. There were rumors of affairs with a number of people, both male and female, and various acts of sexual activity that were frowned upon at the time. Furthermore, there were accusations of drug use, particularly morphine and cocaine, and a number of illegitimate children. He was also said to have links to the Nazi regime in a similar way to his elder brother Edward VIII, and this all led to one of the biggest royal mysteries in recent decades. In 1942, he and 14 others flew an RAF flying boat from Scotland to Iceland on non-operational duties. The aircraft crashed before leaving Scotland, though, and killed everyone on board except for one. George died at the age of 39, but some parts of the story don't add up. He was apparently found with Swedish money, which would have been worthless in Iceland, and there was also an unidentified body at the crash site. Was he really on a secret mission, or was the accident actually done on purpose to prevent the Duke from bringing shame to the family? Number 6. Sarah Ferguson and John Bryan. Sarah Ferguson married Prince Andrew, the Queen's second son, in 1986 and looked forward to a life of luxury after becoming the Duchess of York. She soon found the realities of being part of the royal family to be too much, though. While she had 2 daughters with her husband, they were divorced within 6 years. What followed was a character assassination that surely could have only been planned at the top level of the family. Just 5 months after announcing to the world that they were separating, images were splashed on the front of tabloid papers showing Ferguson sucking on the toes of John Bryan, a Texas millionaire who was said to be her financial advisor. In a flash, her world fell apart around her, and while she remained a duchess, she's never been seen in the same way again. For a long time, it was believed that she was simply a royal groupie, but when the truth surrounding Prince Andrew's shocking behavior began to emerge, it became clear where the true fault in the marriage lay. Ferguson has remained quiet about the truth of how images were captured of her, but it's unlikely that the photographers would have known where to go if they hadn't been tipped off by someone with knowledge of her movements. Number 5. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were related. There are often jokes about royal families being inbred in an attempt to keep control of power and avoiding introducing unwanted brood lines, but rather than being spurious gossip, it's entirely true. Queen Victoria first met Prince Albert at her 17th birthday party in April of 1836, and immediately they hit it off. They were introduced by her uncle, King Leopold I of Belgium, but he also happened to be Prince Albert's uncle too, because the two of them were cousins. According to their memoirs, the two fell in love almost instantly, but the following year she acceded to the throne. Tradition dictates that no one is allowed to propose to a reigning monarch, so when they next met in October of 1839, which was just the second time they had ever been in each other's presence, she proposed to him. This close-knit arrangement didn't seem to affect their ability to expand the family, though, as they went on to have 9 children and 42 grandchildren, many of whom were married into royalty overseas and earned her the nickname of the Grandmother of Europe. Number 4. Prince Charles and Diana's sister. Prince Charles and Princess Diana famously had a rocky relationship that, while it initially seemed good in public, was a toxic and deeply unhappy situation that eventually ended in divorce. There was a time, though, that when things could have turned out very differently, because Diana wasn't actually the first member of the Spencer family that he dated. The Spencers are a historical family, too, that has long been associated with the higher echelons of British society. And in 1977, Charles went out with Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's elder sister. It was during this time that he first met Diana, but things with Sarah were already looking promising. After 9 months, though, things took an unexpected turn after Sarah gave an interview about the prince. In it, she said that their relationship was purely platonic and that she saw him as an older brother. She went on to say that she would never marry a man she didn't love, even if he was the King of England, and that if Prince Charles asked her, she would turn him down. Charles was apparently furious at this and shouted at her that she had done something terribly stupid. At the time, the 16-year-old Diana looked at her 29-year-old sister's boyfriend and thought he was a sad man. Little did she know that she'd get to know him a lot more very soon, and they were engaged just 4 years later. Number 3. Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon. The royal family has a long history of going to extreme lengths to keep unfavorable stories out of the public eye. We know that. But perhaps the saddest example of this is what happened to Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon. Born in 1919 and 1926 respectively, they were the daughters of John Herbert Bowes-Lyon, who was the brother of Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the mother of Queen Elizabeth II, the current monarch. Very little was known about the girls until a 1963 edition of Burke's Peerage, which is a publication detailing the ancestry of British gentry, said that they had died in 1940 and 1961. In 1987, however, it was revealed that they were actually both still alive and had been locked up in the Earlswood Hospital for the mentally ill in 1941. This was a place that was once called the Asylum for Idiots and wasn't so much focused on rehabilitation as a place where families could dispose of troublesome members. Both of the girls were classified as being imbeciles, and apparently neither learned to speak. Nerissa died in 1986 at the age of 66 with only hospital staff at her funeral, and Catherine died in 2014 at the age of 86. During their time in the hospital from their late teens, they never received a single visit from their family or the royals, and received no money other than the £125 paid to the hospital each year. No matter the situation, is this a way to treat your cousins to maintain your public image? Number 2. Prince William's future role. Royal families around the world are made up of different lineages that historically were used to align countries and prevent wars. This could still be happening to this day, though, and there are suspicions, admittedly by conspiracy theorists, that the current family could be involved in a larger plan. The next king will be Charles, who will take over from Queen Elizabeth, but following him will be Prince William. Because of his father and mother's family both being steeped in history, we know that he can count a number of leading historical figures as his ancestors, including William the Conqueror, Ivan the Terrible, Catherine the Great, Vlad the Impaler, Robert Bruce, and plenty more. It's also said that he was born on the summer solstice, which is a highly important date in many beliefs, after labor was induced in his mother. So could this mean that he's being lined up for more than being a king? Number 1. Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. For centuries, there's been jokes about the members of the royal family who aren't directly in line for the throne, and you can only imagine what it would be like to grow up in a situation where you know your elder brother will become king, and you've got to somehow find your own place in the world. This is an issue that Prince Harry is facing now, and the only other living person who knows what it's like is Prince Charles's brother, Andrew, and hopefully Harry is doing everything he can to avoid becoming like him. Andrew has, by all accounts, spent a lifetime trying to feel important, and this has led him to form friendships with a number of dodgy and dangerous people, but ones that have either had a lot of money, a lot of influence, or both. In 1999, he was introduced to American financier, international child trafficker, and pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. They both developed a strong friendship, at least in Andrew's eyes. He invited Epstein and his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell to exclusive events at royal castles, partied with them, and even visited Epstein's private island and properties around the world. He felt important by being associated with them, and they were using him to gain legitimacy for themselves and access to power, and for a time, it was a perfect match. The problem, though, was that behind closed doors, Epstein was breaking countless laws, and this all became public when he was arrested for child trafficking. Epstein eventually killed himself in prison, but an accuser came forward to claim Prince Andrew had been involved as well, a case that has led to him paying more than $10 million as a settlement. It's likely the other members of the royal family forced him to pay this fee and probably gave him most of the money in order to end the story, because in their mind, no matter what he's guilty or innocent of, the most important thing is to maintain their public image, and a prolonged court case of this type would certainly damage it. Watch our Obscure playlist for more top 15 videos about the more obscure subjects in our world. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best and most obscure videos.